Please welcome writer, director, actor, Eva Victor.
Hey, thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Yay. Wow, look at this.
Yes.
Did this just come up?
Yes.
Wow, that was fast.
We're
Cool.
professionals.
You guys are good at this.
Thank
Very
you.
cool.
Not as good as you, first-time film director.
That's a nice segue. Thank you.
Very, very impressive. When I
Thank you.
introduced, I mentioned that, and I was just blown away that and I mentioned to you outside that her psyche, we're able to see it in the visual language. Can you tell us about your approach? I notice we always see her through windows. She's looking out windows. You frame her in doorways that she's stuck behind.
Ugh, you need to say everything, not me. I feel like you understand it better.
Well, that's what I observe. I want to
Thank
hear
you.
your
Yes.
thinking.
You know, the image I always had of this character was someone who was standing at a window and like desperate to rejoin the world and go outside, but also terrified to rejoin the world, so wanting to stay inside behind the window, and sort of this like push-pull of trying to move forward but also not being ready. And so much of the decisions on how we shot things were about the subjective experience of time and the way that places can kind of become haunting in that they remind you of something else. So like an example of that is there's 3 scenes that happen in the bathroom. The first one that we see is Liddy tells Agnes that she's pregnant, and we don't know the history of their relationship in that room, but when we go back in time, we see that this was a place where Agnes kind of shared this super hard experience with Liddy, and she held it very well. So we have this same wide shot through the doorway of them in there in this sort of portrait. And we see that again at the very end with when Agnes is in there with Gavin. And by then we understand all the things that have happened to her in this room, but only we and her share that memory together. He doesn't know it. So in this world that's so small, where we're in very particular places over and over again, telling time and the experience of how trauma lingers through returning to the same place and using the same shot, I felt was helpful in understanding her experience of stuckness.
Tell me about the usage of negative space, which ties what you just said.
Yeah, well, the beginning of the film, I feel like, is always what establishes the visual language of your film. And to me, the beginning is about, well, the opening image of the film is this real wide of this house in the middle of nowhere, this kind of isolated house. And to me, that house is Agnes, and Liddy is sort of these bright headlights that can come through and break that force field of loneliness, and that's sort of what that relationship is in an image. And then the first 20 minutes of the film are establishing this deep, loving friendship. And so the shots are these sort of vast wides where they're the only 2 people in the world. And that's meant to be quite romantic, that they're the only 2 people in this big ocean. They found each other, and they're these small people in this big world. And then when they start to have a bit more tension, or, you know, Liddy's worried about Agnes, we kind of break that 2-shot sort of euphoric feeling and get into close-ups that are more fractured. But, you know, then this opening shot is this long holding on a house, and that's something that we use to tell the story of what Agnes's experience inside another house later on is. So that language is established at the beginning that we come back to, and so hopefully the film feels cohesive because it's sort of the visual language is established in that way.
It's extremely powerful. I mean, I always tell my students that you should be able to study the mise en scène, you know, the composition, the things that you were speaking about, and then you'll be able to understand the film. You know, that content and style go.
They are each other. I mean, there are 2 shots in the film that I haven't really spoken about this, but one of them is like an Edward Hopper painting. It's when she's on the bed looking outside, and oh God, I really should not talk about it if I don't remember what the painting is called, but I feel like it's called like Woman in Bed or like Sunlight Woman or something like that. And then the other one is from The Double Life of Veronique, which is her laying on the bed in this sort of intense close-up that we hold on, and definitely was very inspired by other painterly sources in trying to paint each image, but also a very for students, something I didn't go to film school, and an exercise I did that I found to be very helpful was to take a film that felt like it had a similar heartbeat to this film and deconstruct the film backwards. So like for the film Certain Women, I took a screenshot of every setup and created like a shot list based off of that to understand how Kelly Reichardt was shooting things and how she was moving and how she was editing things. So there's ways to sort of reverse engine, like to understand how people are creating visual language by deconstructing films that you love.
I also love to hear you talk about, I find it so stunning that when Agnes is alone, the house, the colors, the production design changes to it's very cold and sobering. And then when Liddy is around, the same setup, the same setting, but then it changes, it becomes warmer and inviting,
You watched it so well. Everything you say is so affirming. Thank you. Yes, I think something there's many spectrums of things that you get to have in your toolbox. And one of those things for me here was tone, and sometimes the film I think leans more comedic and sometimes more dramatic, and in that spectrum for me existed sort of, okay, A Cottage in the Woods, that can be a horror movie, and that can also be like a rom-com, and so in what moments does this feel like a bubble of warmth, and how do we, when Liddy's around, this is a huge collaboration of light and production design and costumes. How do we make this space feel like this warm womb bubble of joy when they're together? And how does this become a sort of house of horrors when Agnes is alone? And that's all about wanting you to experience the subjective feeling of Agnes's experience in the house, and the house becomes what Agnes is experiencing. And I remember when our production designer, we were meeting with her, and I was meeting people for the job, and she said, like, in what ways does this house, is everything we see through Agnes's eyes, like what's big, what's small, depending on her feeling and her experience in the world. And I thought that was such a beautiful way of supporting the character. And I think my main mission in making the film was, how do I never undermine this person and always prioritize sharing her experience of things, and how do I advocate for her as best as possible, both as a director and a writer and a performer? Like, how do I honor the complexity of this experience for her as best as I can? And I think always deciding, well, what's true for her in this moment? Yeah, there's a creak outside and it's scaring the shit out of her. That's true. And I was less interested in like, what's the creak, and more interested in like, what happens in her body when she hears it.
You choose not to show us violence. We are kept outside of the house, and tell us about that, the cinematic choice of keeping us outside and leaving it up to, it's her words that we have to now trust.
Totally. Yes, I think the reason I made the film was because one of the reasons was I was looking for a film at a time in my life that I think I desperately needed but couldn't find, which was a film that about trying to heal from a very devastating thing. And I was looking for a film that felt like it held me as I was watching and didn't shock me to the point of my body shutting down. And so in making this film, my goal was like, I would like to make a film with no violence in it, but that doesn't shy away from the pain of trying to heal from this kind of violence. And to me, there was never, the script was always Agnes walks in, time passes, time passes. She emerges with her boots and her thesis in her hands. Like, it was always, we never go in. And I think, there are reasons that, to me, were the reasons I wrote it that way, which are like, I don't want to put my audience through that. I don't think it's necessary for the dramatic tension to exist. I don't understand if we go inside whose eyes we're looking through, like where does the camera go becomes like a violent question, and I wasn't interested in answering whose eyes are we looking at, like, and why do we get to see that? That's private. And in real life, we don't get to see what happens behind closed doors, like it's people's words we hear. And I was interested in the film believing her at her word. And I didn't want us to be ahead of her. That felt quite cruel and kind of patronizing. I wanted us to stay in the experience of her body, which is this like impending doom and then devastation that's creeping in. And then once she says the words, that's when we learn about it with her. And Liddy's reaction is what teaches us what happened to her. So staying with her was like always the most important thing. And I don't believe the violence is like the point of the film. The point of the film, the reason the violence is in the film structurally is to get us to this milestone in the friendship where Liddy holds Agnes so very well. And that's what the film is about the care. And I think visually we worked pretty intensely to make her return home feel as private as possible. Like it's, she leaves the house and then we track behind her for a while. We're in the car and you don't really see her face, and there's one light that kind of exposes her eyes at one point. And then we're in the tub, and once she's in this safe place with Liddy is when we get to see her full face. And I wanted her to have that time, and I wanted us to feel with her, not necessarily. I didn't want any disparity between how much she knew and how much we knew. That was very important to me, that we held her, we were with her the whole time emotionally. I also think, not to talk nonstop, but I also think there's something about staying outside the house, which is something that I feel like I experienced in post-production, that is in potentially more similar to the experience of the trauma response of the body freezing than if we went inside. Like, part of me thinks that Agnes's body goes inside, but her spirit stays outside, and maybe this is her memory of that experience, because she might not have a memory of inside the house. So I don't know, it was a long journey with figuring out how to make that work, and once we did, that part worked, and then the rest you have to figure out.
I think you articulated the last part about her body going in, but not her spirit is what I got out of that shot. There was this incredible metaphysical suspension of time and memory and what actually happened. It's very striking.
Thank you.
I want to focus again. Go focus on the friendship aspect. But before we go there, I got to ask you about Preston. The fact that the way you portray him until he does a bad thing, it's like you never show us that he's a bad guy until he's a bad guy. Tell us, and it's a very strong choice.
Yes, I worked very closely with Lewis, who plays the character, and he was very thoughtful about it. And our number one mission was to never undermine Agnes by showing something weird too soon. And I think something important about the relationship is that Agnes and Preston do have this like artistic synergy. Like, there is something going on that's very meaningful to Agnes, which is someone is seeing me as the artist I want to be and is taking me seriously, and I'm an adult here, and the attention feels really good. And for someone that age, I think that's totally okay. And there's then a scene where Liddy asks, like, it says you should fuck him. And she's like, do you think that's why he's telling me I'm smart? And I think what he robs her of is not just, one of the things he robs her of is her ability to dream of her future and to feel that kind of artistic euphoria that their relationship gave her, and the dreamer in her that she could be anything, but that's something that he robs her of in his absence. And that character was always someone who comes in, is in 2 scenes. I mean, that's the thing, he's in 2 scenes, but he makes such an impact because he plays him so charismatic, like in such a charismatic way, and he is like kind of a fumbling guy, and that character is kind of modeled in my head off of a serious man, like just a guy who's trying to get it right. And the movie A Serious Man, not just like A Serious Man. Anyway, and I also felt like something I really enjoyed about putting together this film was like the men in the film are very much supporting characters to this arc of Agnes and this arc of Liddy. Like, they come in, they serve a purpose story-wise, even if some of that is to destroy or some of that is to help. But they come in for their scenes and then they're not part of the world anymore. And I think part of why I structured the film in the nonlinear way that I did was I never wanted there to be a doubt that this film isn't about the friendship and about that love. And there's like a world where, if it's a chronological film, the beginning of the film is very much about him, and you might think that the film's about Agnes and Preston, but I really didn't want that to ever feel true. So it meant a lot to me that he kind of falls out because that feels true to life, and that the film's not about him at all, So, yeah, I don't remember the question, but this is the best time ever, right?
Your answers are amazing. I could listen to you all day. You mentioned just now that of the things he robbed you. Now, acting-wise, before the trauma, you as an actress, you're full of creativity, expressing physically creativity, and your physicality changes after. Can you tell us about calibrating your work as an actress?
Yeah, it was kind of, I sort of, after writing the script, I did a lot of acting work with Rebecca Deely, who's like an amazing coach, and we kind of realized that there's like 3 scenes, maybe 4 scenes, but really 3 before this happens chronologically. So we really only get to see Agnes like for a few moments before. So those scenes actually need to carry a lot of life in them. Like, we need to really understand who this person is before, and I think it was very fun to do those scenes when we got there, because I think the only other scene that felt like that was there's this scene near the end of the film where Agnes is teaching Lolita to the classroom, and like she is not self-conscious in this way that's kind of new for the film. And she's free, and she's kind of doing the things she loves, so she's not thinking about heavy things. And that's interrupted by like a knock on the window by her evil nemesis. But I think it was really exciting to play that, to be Agnes at that time. And the way that I felt about Agnes was that she was like, the animal that always felt real to me with her was a whale, like that she was moving at this real glacial pace, but not without purpose. Like, there was just, she's on a different timeline, and she's a little too big, like for the ocean or something, and she can't find anyone else. Like, she's so big she doesn't see anything else, and I always was like listening to whale sounds, and when they were like, well, what do you want the score to sound like? I was like, I have a list of whale sounds. And everyone's like, well, you don't mean that. And I was like, no, I don't. But there's something here of like, of the way that this person is too big for their body, or like there was just this way. And I think honestly, costumes did a lot for me, because her like, there was something about the way her clothes hung on my body that felt really appropriate, and like she was finding comfortable textures when she could, and but I do think so much of what allowed my acting to feel really good was working with Naomi, because she is just brilliant, and like
She's terrific.
she's
yeah.
wonderful and so warm and so generous, and like she created such a comfortable space. It was my first time directing, and she was very non-judgmental of me when I needed to take an extra second, and she was very supportive, and I think the effortlessness of building that gave me this sort of understanding of who Agnes was in relation to her. Like, Liddy always to me felt like the sun, and so Agnes was like this moon, and having Naomi's bright light around felt like it informed how I needed to move in response to that.
The script, to me, it's almost mathematical. I mean, you have one character, your character, Agnes, who's stuck, and then you impose Liddy, who is actually, she's a listener, and she's unafraid of what you're saying, but that doesn't stop her from growing.
Yes.
And the arc of her queer journey is phenomenal. Can you tell us about plotting the two?
Yes. Well, I do think if you are trying to tell a story about time, having one of your characters have the most intense, explosively exciting 5 years next to someone like just getting out of bed one time is a way to show how time moves differently for different people. And I was really excited to kind of put some of my experience of my journey of queerness into Liddy, and I gave her like my experience of reading Giovanni's Room and being like incredibly moved and like kind of turned on by that book. And like I think that like thinking about their friendship, obviously this friendship throughout the film like waxes and wanes in the way it's supposed to, but I think the reason I imagine they have a lifelong friendship going forward is because Liddy left and went to do what she needed to do. And I think I feel like I didn't really understand that she did that until a lot of my understanding of what the film was happened in post-production. Like, I think I got to see it as not myself for the first time, and that was very emotional but also helpful. And I feel like a lesson from Liddy that it's just like you are allowed to prioritize yourself. You're allowed to not be, not put someone else not make them the main part of your life. You can leave and you can still be worried about them. You can still check in, but like your life is your life. And I think the reason Agnes and her, I think, have a lifelong friendship is because she left and she went to do what she wanted to do. She lives in New York. She has a partner. She lives this life that she's obviously meant to live. And that's why she can come back and not be mad at Agnes, honestly, because I do think this kind of trauma makes someone quite selfish, and not in a bad way. Just like Agnes is so focused on herself. Like Liddy comes and says she's pregnant, and she's like, "Are you gonna name it Agnes?" Like she can't get out of the loop of like, oh, this is not good about me. Like she's confused. She can't see outside herself. And the reason the end of the film to me was the end of the film is because it marks, obviously not the end of any kind of healing. Healing lasts forever and never ends or something, but it's the moment that Agnes can see, oh, these two people want to go on a walk without me, like I can babysit. And that's such a small offering, but for Agnes, it's like a real step of seeing outside of herself. And then there's like this moment where she can vow to this baby that she can listen in the way that Liddy did, and that's her gift. Yeah, and not be afraid.
It's a beautiful, beautiful full circle.
Thank you.
Yeah. Tell me about the cat, and also the relationship with the importance of the cat.
Well, you know, my cat saved my life, and I love my cat, and he is everything to me. And I saw this tweet, hate to say it, but I did, and it was all about how if you don't like cats, you have a problem with consent. And I was like, and I saw that like 10 years ago, basically, and I was like, whoa, so true. Like, if you don't like when an animal doesn't want you to touch them, like, look at that. So it did feel appropriate to me to include the autobiographical part of it that is my cat saved my life, but also like I do think there's something to be said about energetically. You can kind of tell when something wants to be near you or wants you to touch it, and that's true. And I also thought Agnes isn't the kind of like Agnes would bring a cat into her house and then live with the cat as like another person. Like Agnes just felt like a cat was appropriate for her because they're both so quiet and weird. And, you know, working with cats is crazy because they do not know they're in a movie and they do not take direction. So holding up a kitten, it was so sweet that there's something so crazy about working with a cat and a baby because you're looking at this cat, it doesn't know it's in a movie, it thinks it's on the sidewalk getting picked up by you, and it forces you to be really present with the little thing. And same with the baby, like the baby's like, why the hell are you talking to me? And it's like, good fucking question. Well, it's a movie, but beyond that, like, we have to own that you don't want this. So it's very interesting, but I loved it, and I would always work with cats and babies. And if you're making your own film where you get to act in it, I would say, like, you can write in something where you're holding a cat the whole time. And it's just like a hack, so.
Well, good tip. Good tip. There's two scenes that I love that I got to ask you about. The kid telling Agnes about her shoes being untied.
Okay. Thank you. You watched the movie so well. I'm euphoric about you.
Okay.
Thank you.
I do appreciate your film greatly.
You know, the shoes untied thing was interesting because a lot of people gave me the note, like, cut that.
Why?
Because I think they thought it took away from it, but I'm like, no, it doesn't. This is a thing people don't know about, but men like to tell you your shoes are untied. When
You're
obviously,
mansplaining.
yeah, anytime your shoe's untied, you know that, okay? Like, you know that, and for some reason, you don't want to stop to tie your shoe, and that's private and personal. And I also think, beyond how funny that was that I said that, like, it's a movie about how things are happening next to things that are really hard, and life has different things happening all at once. Like, this horrible thing is happening behind closed doors, and two students are walking by, and Agnes is going to her car, and someone notices her shoes, and like, that's the world, and that's life, and you don't really know what's happening in someone's internal world. And you know, in the script it was, your shoes are untied, and she says thanks. So we cut the thanks because that was a little weird. But when people understood the shoes are untied, I was like, I like that because it's true. Anyway, I said nothing right there.
Okay.
I said nothing.
I could listen. I could listen to you talk forever, explaining.
I need you to come hang out with me then, because that's not how everyone feels.
Okay. And then the panic attack sequence.
Yes. Okay, so that's interesting because for that, I actually called upon our intimacy coordinator because I was really nervous for that. I was more nervous for that than basically anything else because I really wanted it to seem accurate, but I also didn't want to send my body into some sort of thing I didn't want it to go into. And she was very, very helpful, and it was, I had like a lot of, honestly, like oils to smell. Like lemon is a really good thing that brings you back into your body. It was a very interesting day though, because all the monitors were dying as we were driving because it was raining. And like, to me, I was so happy it was raining because it looked like expensive. I was like, this is a movie, like it's raining in the movie. And I thought it was beautiful too, and it looked kind of dangerous. And there was a stunt coordinator in the back of the car who was like, it was very interesting. Making a movie is really interesting because there's so many things going on all the time. I'm losing my mind, but I love you guys. Basically, the panic attack is added. The stress of that moment is very much helped by sound design of honks and of screeches. But you know, it was fine. What was your question about it?
I love that scene.
Oh, cool.
And the specificity of it.
There used to be another panic attack in the movie that's like right after the dinner party scene where Agnes gets up and goes to the bathroom. We used to cut to the bathroom, and there's sort of this wide of her in the bathroom through a sliver, breathing and not being able to sort of be in her body and not being well. But we got rid of it because it wasn't necessary. But I think the panic attack later on has helped by not having that first one. And it's not so bad when you're having a panic attack to have like the Zodiac killer knock on your window and be like the nicest guy in the world. It's
And
a nice way.
there was a follow-up that I wanted to ask you. You mentioned that you found the movie while you were editing, but the structure had been there.
Yes.
Even before you wanted the 5 segments.
Yes, the chapters were very important to me. I think as someone who had written things before but was very much daunted by the task at writing the film, it was very helpful for me to understand the film in chapters and to take off the mental block of like, how do I fit someone's whole life and like how do I fit this whole experience into a film? It's like, no, actually the parameters of this experience are an emblematic depiction of 1 year in each chapter, and the scope of the film is these 5 years. And we're just tracking these 5 years right after this happens until 5 years go by. And like the announcement of this baby marks the beginning and the arrival of the baby marks the end. And that scope and that understanding of like how I wanted the film to work in chapters alleviated the pain of wanting to cover as much as I wanted to cover. And, this is about a character who's writing about short stories, and I think maybe her mind works in sort of chapters in this way, so it all felt thematically relevant to how she would process the world and how she processes time. Like the jury scene to me kind of feels like an hour long, but the next year, and that's sort of meant to be 1 year where she feels stuck all year in this one room, and the next year, like, she gets a job, Liddy gets engaged, all this stuff happens in 1 year, and that goes by like this. So her subjective experience of time was how I wanted the years to function.
And I lied, I said that was the last question, but I have another
Let's keep
question.
going.
Yeah, the fact that, thank you for not diving into the legal, procedural about her, what happened to her, and also that there's not, it's not a post-mortem about the trauma. Instead, you show us how a person is able to, evolve.
Yeah. Well, that was like my sick desires, that like the jury scene starts and you're kind of like, oh, this movie was balancing something, and it fell into the trap of now being like about Agnes at trial, which is so like melodramatic, and I kind of wanted you to be disappointed and then be like, oh no, she's just here for jury duty. I don't know if that happened, but I like to believe it did because I wasn't here, so I don't know how you reacted. But I think the amount I had to say about the legal experience is sort of, Agnes says, I don't want him to go to jail because he'd just be someone who does this who's now in jail, and that felt like about the beginning and end of all I wanted to say about like the legal system's ability to support her. And I think there's moments when she tries to figure out what to do, and that's to go to the doctor and to go to the HR representatives, and those are dead ends in a way. So the film really isn't about that because I don't see those roads as options always.
And tell me about the language that you create around what happened. I mean, only once we hear the R word, which is from a doctor. She refers to it as the bad thing. Tell us about navigating that language and the importance of that.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've been doing press for the last year, and once in a while someone will be like, they're not ready to say the word, like they can't face it. And I'm like, no fucking way. Like they have geniusly and thoughtfully created a language that allows them to talk about this in a very personal, non-scary way to them. And those words are like big, and they feel scary, and they feel impersonal, and like they have found words that feel like they're about this particular event that happened to Agnes only, and through the language they're using, they're protecting each other from being scared. And that to me always felt like a really loving way to talk about it. And also back to my like desire to not put my audience into a shocking, to not shock my audience. Like I wanted us to all feel like we were using words that protected all of us and the experience of watching the film. And yes, the doctor is the only one that says it, and obviously that word lands like really harshly on both of them and on us too, because it's like inappropriate tonally in the film. But yeah, I think that was, that always was to me a way that they very thoughtfully like mastered being able to talk about this without hurting each other.
Well, you are extremely talented, and I
Aw,
cannot wait to see what you do next.
No, thank you.
Please keep making movies.
No, I gotta sleep first, but
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That was